start here now and
Yeah.
just see what happens. Oh, there you
Okay.
are.
Have you found me?
I found you.
Hey.
Weirdly, I don't know how that's happened, but there we go. So I just start recording. Oh, okay. Well, we'll see what happens. So we're recording now. So just before we get started, obviously we know each other through Boccia England.
Yep.
For yeah. So like I normally do with those interviews. So could you introduce yourself? You know, your name, your job, you know, you're retired, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, certainly. So my name's Sandra King. I'm semi-retired. I'm working towards it, but I haven't got there quite yet. And I most of the work I do is around coaching and tutoring in boccia and in inclusive sport.
Uh, so um so so what sort of previous jobs have you done prior to Boccia England?
So I've worked in and out of boccia, but actually I probably volunteered as much, if not more, than I've worked in boccia. I'm a lifelong PE teacher. So I trained at Chelsea College of PE in Eastbourne, and I taught in mainstream schools until I think it was 1994 when I found a job at a school called Patcham House in Brighton, which was a day special school. Um, and from there on, I kind of got converted to working with people with physical disabilities primarily, and less in mainstream schools.
Yeah, and so yeah, funny that you just started off. So I've got down here that you started in P. So did you get involved in sport at a young age?
Oh, very much so. Yes, my family are quite sporty, really, but I just always loved sports, and I knew as soon as I went to secondary school, I knew that there was such a thing as a PE teacher. I knew that was the only job for me. In fact, I couldn't understand how anybody would ever want to do anything else. Um, so yeah, it was I kind of inbuilt, I think.
And yeah, so it was your preferred choice. So when did you get involved with sport in general? I mean, from a young age. So when you did you leave school or did you leave college or you know, how did you get into the
Yeah.
sports side of things?
No, so I can remember going back to primary school days, being in. Um, I was in the rounders team. I've probably got more memories of that because I've got a lovely photograph from those days. We were a really successful rounders team, um, and but I lived in Andover in Hampshire then, and I went to the athletics club in Andover, so that was obviously outside school as well. And then when I went to Andover Grammar School, I I was that girl that was in every team that was possible. There was very little I didn't do. Um, Netball sort of outgrew me, so but I played hockey. Um, in the summer, I did mostly athletics and rounders. In the winter, it was hockey and gymnastics, but I was in the swimming team as well. And I was kind of that all rounder. I was often the person who could fill the gaps that other people couldn't fill. You know, I wasn't the best at everything, um, but I was pretty good.
It sounds it. So, so when you got into jobs, obviously you mentioned that you were a PE teacher and you were involved in inclusion sports and all that. So after the jobs that you've just explained, did you know about boccia in your in the special needs school, or was it just when you joined Toulouse?
I know it's a funny story actually because I was the first PE teacher at Patcham House School. They hadn't had a PE teacher before me.
Wow.
And I was only going in to do something like a day and a half a week. It was a very small school. And when I went there, the headmaster was really, really excited. He's just discovered this sport called boccia, and he'd spent the entire year's PE money on a set of boccia balls, and I didn't know what it was. So obviously at that time, I tried to find out more about it and got myself onto a leaders award course. In those days, that was the only course you could do. And so, yeah, I discovered what boccia was. And then strangely at Patcham House School, I think we probably only had about 3 people that would have been eligible to play boccia then. Because at that point it was only being played in the Paralympic pathway, whereas now it's open to people with virtually any kind of disability. Yeah, so I stumbled across boccia, and it's all down to Bob, the headmaster at Patcham House.
Oh, brilliant. And so you uh did you join Toulouse from Patcham House, or how did you get
I
into?
did. Yeah, I did. It was so it's another funny story in a way. I was teaching part-time at Patcham House
Yeah.
and part-time at Brighton College, which is an independent school. Um, and I was sat at the college next to somebody else in the uh, staff room, and in the very corner of a newspaper next to me was this advert for a job at Trelaw College and School. And I just sort of looked at it and thought, oh, it's a shame there's nothing near like that near us in Brighton. But it just sowed a seed of thought really in my mind. And I snuck back into the staff room the next day and took a photocopy of the advert and investigated it a bit more. And then I went to speak to the headmaster that had bought the bocce balls at my other school, and he knew Trelaws, and he knew that every year there were 1 or 2 people that went on from Patcham House to Trelaws. And he said to me, even if you don't apply, you have to go and look at this school first. He said, you're just going to be, your mind's going to be blown by it, basically. So he encouraged me to apply because he was thinking more about me and my development than he was about his own school in a way. And so, yeah, that's how I came to apply and get the job.
Brilliant. And so you stayed at Toulouse for quite some time.
Yeah, I was there for 13 years in total, from 1997 till 2010.
Yeah.
And I worked across the school and college for most of that time. And just at the end, I only worked at the school because I had increasing roles of responsibility there.
Oh, okay. Yeah, but we should explain to the viewers very quickly that
Mhm.
presumably you at the Foyle House at Toulouse old dumping ground, if you like, and then obviously they've moved on to a bigger school where they are now in Alton, Hampshire. So
Yeah.
presumably you started off at Foyle House and then went on with Toulouse moving to the big school.
Well, that's right. So what happened was the school was on the Froyle site, and then the college was on the Hollybourne site, so about 3 miles apart.
Okay.
And yeah, so literally on 2 afternoons a week, I would go down to the Hollybourne site. So I was based at the school, and then I'd go down to the college and deliver the college sport program, which was kind of all done in a couple of different afternoons. Um, so yeah, that was it. I was head of PE at the school.
Yeah, at the school. And funny enough, I was speaking to Cassandra on Tuesday, and she mentioned you quite fondly. And so at Seven All Stars, at the very early years, you were coaching with Barry Bowden at Toulouse with the Seven All Stars group. Is that right?
So yes, actually, so I know Cassandra because she's the mother of one of the athletes that I used to coach, Cecilia.
Yeah.
Um, and when I first went to Toulouse, there was only one student playing boccia. There's a
Oh,
chap called David Morgan, and he happened to be he was in the house where Barry worked. So Barry was doing some coaching with David, or just playing with him for a bit. So when we started up our boccia squad at Trelaws, we started from nothing in 1997. Well, from one person, from David, and within a year, we got about 40 students training every week, which was amazing. And so Barry and I ran that with various other help. And then a bit later, um, I was very lucky in PE, and we got a PE specific teaching assistant, and mine was Kim Smith. And Kim has also gone on to do lots of things in boccia, and she's a very good coach herself now. So sort of the three of us, aided and abetted by lots of other people who came and went in the meantime, set up our squad at Trelaws. I've forgotten if that's quite the question you asked me, but
Oh, no, no. So the question was just about you set up the club.
Yes, Southern All Stars. Yeah, so that came about because people were leaving the college and sometimes the school, and there were no clubs for them to go to. There just wasn't anything. This is going back, say, to the early 2000s, and so we thought, well, let's set up a club here they can come back to. So Southern All Stars was set up, and it was me that started it and got it going. And we had people from Bristol in the west and from I think it was Colchester in the east. So it had to be a Sunday club. We had to give people enough time that they could have a couple of hours travel in either direction. And so that's where that started. Yes, so Southern All Stars was started by me. And then there was a small group of people that always came, and Cassandra was one of those. And I always knew that because of all the other things I was doing, I didn't have the capacity to keep running SAS, but I needed to hand it on to somebody else. So basically, having got it up and running, then sort of passed it on to those that were coming regularly, and a little team was formed to keep it going.
Brilliant. Well, I didn't know you only had one student playing it, and then years later, I mean, now people are doing it. All the students from Trelaw School are now joining the club and doing the club at Trelaws, and they're all going on to do great stuff.
Yeah, no, it's true. At one stage, down at the college, I had 16 students in my squad there with only one court. So that was a challenge for training. Got very, very inventive about my training drills. And I think at one point there was something like 13 or 14 of that 16 had either been invited to England, played for England, or played for GB. So it was Trelaw's time, previous to us, there was Portland College that did really well. Star have done really well, and Percy Headley up in the north. So there've been different places that have produced people, but in that time, probably in the early noughties, Trelaws was just absolutely going strong, and there were so many people there that went on to do good stuff in Boccia. And it wasn't only the players, it was the staff as well, because it's people like Barry and Kim, and it was even we used to get gap year students. We call them the volunteers. And a good example is Jess Hunter and Lisa Clements. So I put Jess and Lisa together as a BC3 player and a ramp assistant when Jess was in year 7, and they went on to be at the Paralympics together and everything else. And that was because we'd sat and talked and gone, I think they'll make a good pairing, back in year 7. So Lisa carried on even though she wasn't a volunteer at Trelaws anymore. So it was everything around it, really. It wasn't even just the players, although obviously they were the focus of everything.
Yeah, and Kim's obviously carried on. She's still there now, coaching some of the people at the school and college. So that's, the legacy is still continuing.
A huge success this week for Kim, actually, in that one of her players, Sally, has just been taken onto the world-class programme, which is just fantastic news.
Yeah, brilliant news. Yeah, it's always nice to see younger people coming through the pathway and then going on to Boccia UK.
Absolutely, we need that all the time.
Yeah, and of course the female quota that's recently been brought in. So all very good news.
Yeah.
Yeah. So could you give us a few name drops? I mean, obviously you've coached quite a few people at Trelaws and other places where. So is there any sort of like high level players that you could shout out that you've coached?
I will do a few, but I've got to tell you, there's going to be people I've missed, and I don't want to offend anybody. I've actually written a few down because, So first of all, the biggest mistake is a lot of people think I was involved with David Smith, who obviously is our world champion. But actually, I never coached him. He was in my class for 5 years. I was his form tutor. I taught him in PE, but Barry was always his coach.
Yeah.
So, but there's lots of others. So I've just made a list of some of them here. So players that went on to play for GB at some point: Cecilia Turk, Liam Beresford, Jess Hunter, Dan Bentley, Ali Lalani, and Andrew Morgan. And then some of the England players more recently: Penny Frood, Tia Rule, Jason Rolfe, and Jade Peake. But as I said, the list is really long.
It is.
There's lots of people that people might not know now, but who actually, in their day had made England level.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, no, I mean, it's just a list of names you could think of off the top of your head.
Yeah.
So that's absolutely fine.
Yeah.
So going on, moving on a bit. So you left Toulouse 2010, did you say?
Yes.
Yeah. So presumably that was the sort of time where Boccia England was formed. Is that right?
It was around that time, but that wasn't the reason. So the reason I left was because we had a little thing called the 2012 Paralympics. And I actually didn't leave in 2010 as such, but it was the last time I taught there. I got a secondment from Toulouse to go and work on the London 2012 Paralympics. And I got the job as competition manager for Boccia. So basically that means that I had to arrange and provide everything that was needed for the Boccia competition. And the idea was that after those 2 years, I would go back to Toulouse again and pick up where I left off. But unfortunately, while I was away, Toulouse had a massive reshuffle and restructure, and it was decided that the 3 posts of responsibility that I held were no longer required. So, as has to happen, I was offered a post as basically a basic PE teacher. But actually, I'd been head of PE and a senior teacher and director of specialism. We had a physical and sensory specialism. So to go back to sort of just being a PE teacher again was something I didn't think I could cope with very easily. So I decided to leave at that point.
Fair enough. And so obviously back then it was GB Boccia, and obviously now it's been renamed as Boccia UK.
Yeah.
So presumably you worked with Boccia UK as one of the athletes, and then you went on to Boccia England. What was the timeline for Boccia England?
Yeah, well, so things happened a bit differently. So first of all, we used to go to Paralympics together as Great Britain back in the day. But actually, the rest of the Paralympic cycle, the other 3 years, we competed separately as England and Wales and Scotland. So in 2000, Toulouse had our first national champion, a BC3, a young lady called Amy Bishop.
Okay.
And she was invited to go to train with the England squad. Now, at that time, I'd done the only courses I could do, which was a leaders award in Boccia, and I think I might have done an officiating award, but again, it was an introduction to officiating, really.
Yeah.
So pretty basic refereeing. And there was no other pathway at all. Boccia at that point was under Cerebral Palsy Sport. They were the governing body, and CP ISRA were the international governing body. And I went to volunteer with the England and Wales squad because I thought the only way I could really do justice to coaching a national champion in Amy was to improve my own skills. And it was the only way I could see was to see whether I could go with Amy to some of these training camps and see if that would, what would rub off of me and what I'd learn.
Yeah.
Roll on 4 years later, I was at an England training camp, and there were 2 coaches. And on the Saturday, they said to me, "Would you like to do a bit of coaching in the morning?" I thought, well, I'd love to. I'm a PE teacher. I've obviously, and there were lots of things I felt, oh, I'd love to do this, I'd love to do that. But, you didn't want to push anything. But the funny thing was, on the Sunday morning, I arrived, and these 2 said, Sandra's going to coach you today, not just this morning, today. And by the way, we're resigning, and Sandra's now going to be your head coach.
Wow.
So there was quite a furore actually in the boccia world, because everyone was like, well, who's she and who's appointed her? And, actually there was a big meeting about it at the national champions. And I felt pretty rotten, because, it just landed on my shoulders.
Yeah.
But in fact, the difference was made really when I said, look, I'm very happy to stand back if somebody would like to take it on. And as often with volunteering, nobody else stepped forward. So that kind of quieted people, and I took it on from there. So I became the head coach and the team manager of the England and Wales team. But in fact, we went out in 2005 to Portugal to European Championships, and we had quite a new team, because as usual, after the 2004 Paralympics, several people had retired from the GB boccia squad, and we could see there was a gap. So we'd actually been working in that previous time with some young players that were coming through. And those young players were David Smith and Daniel Bentley and Ali Lalani. And we went out to the European Championships with Nigel Murray, who was a proven player, who was a Paralympian. He'd been Paralympic gold medalist in Sydney in 2000. And he'd obviously been in Athens as well. And then these new players, and to everybody's surprise, including our own in many respects, they picked up the bronze medal. It was this very young team. David was so young that actually we had to take him out of his GCSE maths exam. And of course, he's gone on to be, he's an aeronautical engineering degree. So he needed maths. So that was quite a tussle to get him out of that. But it was absolutely worth it because of how well they did,
Yeah.
And then that was actually the last time that England and Scotland played separately. They then started to amalgamate and became, Great Britain. And it was around similar times that the CP Sport handed over to Boccia England. I think that was might even have been in 2012 actually, because I think they're just celebrating their 10th anniversary around now.
Of course.
Yeah. So yeah, everything happened all together. And then I worked with England in a volunteer role on and off for probably about 8 or 10 years. I really had to give it up in 2012. I was a bit busy.
Very busy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you mentioned 2012, so you had to organise and arrange everything.
Yeah.
And after that, you presumably then took up a position in. So after 2012, you left Toulouse. The games had finished. What did you do prior?
Well, this was I thought I was going to be completely unemployed. It was a very, very strange thing. I suppose my specialism is in working with people who have high levels of physical disability, but also high levels of intellectual ability. And that core group has kind of disappeared into mainstream schools. And so there's not a group of people that kind of like that in very many places anymore. I applied for lots of different jobs, and I did manage to get myself a year's maternity cover, and I worked in wheelchair tennis for a year at the National Tennis Centre. And after that time, I was unemployed. And so I set up business on my own. It was kind of that was when I thought, well, I've been tutoring courses for quite a long time. I do a lot of coaching. And I moved up to Cambridgeshire so that I could sort of reduce my living costs and things. And started basically doing anything and everything that I could find that was sport related. So I ended up going back into primary schools and teaching gymnastics. There was a need for that, and it was something that I could do. And actually, hadn't been able to do a lot of gymnastics at Toulouse. So
clearly not.
I had tried it one time, I have to say, but that's another story.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's really when I just got back into doing whatever anybody would have me do. But it
Mm,
included, of course, lots of boccia courses, and um, nobody was really coaching boccia then in terms of being paid as a coach.
no, it's all volunteering roles
Yeah.
all the
So I
time.
think, when that started, I was one of the first people in many respects that said, I've got some skills here, but actually I'm going to charge you for them. And it's I think it's good because it's professionalizing our sport a little bit more. And I think it's beginning to happen. And there are a few of us now that are professional boccia coaches. Um, but it's a good start.
Yeah, it's improving all the time now.
Yeah. And of
Yeah,
course we have to be very um, what's the word, accountable. Actually, if we're not going to be just volunteers anymore, if we're going to charge you for our coaching, we've got to be very accountable for the level of our coaching.
yeah, of course. And in the later career, so after your unemployment and then you went into primary schools, how did you get into your role as head of talent at Boccia England?
It was really one of those timing things. So I'd been doing quite a lot of work with the young athlete, and that had come to an end. And it meant I had a bit more of a gap. And it was a time I thought, well, I've got to go out and look for some more work here. And just at that time, the job came up at Boccia England, and it was just very, very timely. And I thought, well, gosh, I've got lots of the skills they're looking for, and applied. So yeah, that's how I got into that. It was just about the timing being right, you know. Um, so
Yeah,
go on.
yeah, and well, funny enough, because when did you start that job?
I think it was the end of 2019.
Yeah,
It wasn't that long before the world went mad and we all went into lockdown.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, because I do remember seeing you late 2019, and of course, when I was talking to you, I think it was a big cat competition. I can't remember, but I do remember a lot of people coming up to you and going, "Oh, hello, Miss King," and
Yes,
they were like former law students still playing boccia.
yeah. There are still so many former Trelaw students playing boccia.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yes,
Actually, I'm correcting myself. I think it was the early 2019 that I started.
oh,
But yes, so it was quite good to start with, to get out, and we had boccia academies then. It was really good to go around to the academies, and it was part of my job to try and really get the academies going, and build them up a bit more and build the knowledge base there. Um,
yeah, yeah. But
and
it's quite nice to have various academies at the time to around the country
yeah,
for people to go to in their sort of local or the nearest one and then try and get their career going. And of
yeah,
course, it's worked for a lot of people now.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and so you discussed that the world went mad and we all got into lockdown in 2020, probably the whole of 2020, if you put it
Yeah.
like that. So in lockdown, you all had a lot of time to ourselves, and you did some online YouTube butcher training videos, didn't you?
I did. In fact, I'm sitting at the famous dining table right now.
Yeah.
Everybody got to know my living room. It was, I mean, as soon as it happened, really, at Boccia England, we knew that we were working with a cohort of people who were highly vulnerable, um, who therefore needed to be staying indoors and not meeting other people. And I think as a team, actually, we absolutely did a great job of engaging with everybody there. There was something going on virtually every day of the week to interact with. And as time went on, and it became obvious that you know people might not want to train, and from an England perspective or whatever, we weren't expecting anything because people had to manage themselves during that time, and we totally respected that some people chose to focus more on their education, or that there might have been other things, um, but some people wanted to play boccia. And of course, the only space they might have had available was maybe the kitchen or maybe the hall, but there weren't very many places that anybody's got in their house where you can throw a bocce ball and not ruin things. Although there were a few that said they ended up with a dent in the washing machine or something, where they keep throwing balls in that direction.
Of course.
Yeah, we started with various challenges, and the rainbow challenges came on. That started things going as well, and actually then I started doing these online videos and things, and they started. I mean, I'd never done anything like that at all. I had no idea about how to set it up, and if you being able to be a spy on the wall and see some of those first things I had, where I got a pile of books and my camera, sort of rested against them and that sort of thing. I quickly realised I needed a tripod, and I needed to set certain things out, and I eventually, sorted out a way that worked, and was able to put out lots of challenges to people and lots of things to do, and they're still there, which is good. I've got them on my own YouTube channel now, some of them, and hopefully they're still useful for people to see.
Yeah, and if people wanted to have a look at them, what's your YouTube channel name and everything?
Yeah, just literally look for Sandra King Boccia.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'll come up. Yeah.
Yeah, just plugging yourself in there.
Thank you.
And obviously Tokyo was meant to be 2020, but of course it's been pushed back to 21.
Yeah.
And the coverage that was there at I spoke to quite a few people about this since, and it was very good to have obviously Jerry Smith in the final live televised on Channel 4 at 9 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of streaming online. There was
Yes.
only one court being shown
Yeah.
out all of and so what would you want to see happen with media coverage in future Paralympics, Paris, Los Angeles, what do you want to see with Boccia in the future?
I kind of actually want to take you back a little bit further, if that's all right, because the story starts earlier, in as much as so World Boccia have been trying to put content online for quite a long time, but when they went to a Paralympics, there are different I don't know there's different agreements about media and all the rest of it, and so it wasn't possible. So, as example, prior to Rio, we were used to being able to watch the World Championships, like you say, maybe only one quarter, whatever, but we'd watch it. We could even have some commentary, and in the international governing body have been doing that for a while.
Okay.
But in Rio, we had no coverage. And going back to London, it was the time that actually the other competition managers, so all the sports had a competition manager, the other competition managers realised that I wasn't quite as quiet and easygoing as they maybe thought I was the day that we discovered that there were only 8 live feeds for any of the Paralympic sports, and Boccia wasn't going to be one of them.
Okay.
Now, into perspective, 8 live feeds was amazing. That's what Channel 4 did for us. Absolutely amazing to have that. Okay. And that covered, I think, about 11 sports, but there's more like 20. So then Boccia weren't the only sport that didn't have it. As a competition manager, the biggest issue that gave me during the games time was that I had other countries with cameras that wanted to be on the field of play. Now, if they were on the field of play where they wanted to be, they were going to stop the spectators from being able to watch Boccia. So we had to manage that really, really well. So there were actually quite a number of cameras on the field of play, but nobody in England or the UK was getting to watch that because it was being streamed back to Korea and Japan and other places. At that point in time, I found out that in other sports, written into their rules, there are rules around things like you've got to have an overhead camera, or you've got to have live action replay, a bit like VAR or whatever.
Yeah.
And so at the end of the games, you write reports for everybody, and a lot of stuff gets handed over to the next game so that they have learning from that and so on. And one of the things I did was write some stuff for World Boccia, or their predecessors, saying you really need to write this into your rules, that you need to have some form of camera. So the overhead cameras that we now have and that you've seen in Tokyo, that's come out of that actually, well, Boccia have written that into. So if you look at the competition manual, that so not in the ordinary rules that the players use, but there's a thing called a competition manual that sets out how to organise a competition, and that has that written in now, so that when you go to a Paralympics, they have to put that in. But it also means we have to have cameras in all our events, because we have to abide by the same rules.
Okay.
So coverage has got better and better. I don't think commentary has caught up with coverage yet. So we're getting better coverage, but sometimes the commentary is not good enough yet. I think we need more experienced commentators, and we know we've got some great commentators around, but of course a lot of them are either coaching already or playing at the moment or whatever. We haven't got that many commentators who haven't got another role in the sport, and that's probably our issue just now. So I'd love to see it. I'd love to see across the Paralympics the ability to go anywhere, somewhere online that everybody can get hold of, and we can watch any court at any time. We can just watch anything we want to. Whether we'll ever get to that, I don't know. There's a massive cost implication to it and everything else that goes behind that, and it's a massive organisational and logistical nightmare, which I'm sure you'll understand from your role that you're doing now. But it's getting better and better. It was non-existent when I started in the sport, so it is getting better and better.
Yeah, I mean, I was just smiling through because I remember it was World Championships in Liverpool a few years ago, and of course it was on BBC Sport.
Yeah.
I think it was David at one point, and then a few other courts being shown. And I remember the commentary I was playing with the match, and I remember because that's quite obviously I've got everyone on Facebook. Some people were saying sort of like, oh, the commentary's quite. But I remember at one point, I think it was a woman that said, "Oh, I've got 6 balls for each player. You could get up to 6 points to win a game." And we're all going, "Oh, yeah, obviously."
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we had some of the Scottish players were commentators there, and actually they were brilliant because they understand all the tactics. And I think that's the thing about Boccia. In fact, even going back to 2012 again, and we had to do media training because we didn't know if we were going to be interviewed. And I went to media training with somebody from tennis and somebody from basketball, I think it was. And the lady that did tennis, they asked us some really interesting questions about what was going on in the world of women's tennis particularly, and we weren't particularly strong at that time in women's tennis, but she was a former tennis player. And they asked us some really interesting questions, exactly the same with the basketball player. And when I came forward to do my practice, they asked me, what is Boccia? Because you've got to start there because nobody knows what it is.
No.
And I said, but that's not the answer. That's not the question I want to answer. I want to answer the question, why should you come and watch Boccia? What is exciting about Boccia? What do you love about Boccia? Because I want to put across the passion that I had for it, because people don't know. And even if you've never seen wheelchair basketball, you've seen a wheelchair and you've seen basketball, and you can work out what that looks like.
Yeah.
But so we have to set the scene about what Boccia is. But also we want to enthuse about it. And that's the point I discovered that, the politicians' answer, which is that the politicians will answer the question they wanted you to ask and not the one you actually asked. That was a big learning for me then.
Yeah. Fair enough. And so you retired from your job at Boccia England a couple of years ago, wasn't it?
Yeah, it must be now, yes.
Yeah. And so I hear in the pipeline that you're still you're doing private coaching now. Is that right, or
Yeah.
you're fully retired, or?
No, I would say I'm semi-retired. My children always joke about that. Actually I'm probably semi-working as opposed to semi-retired. No, I do still do some bocce coaching,
Yeah.
and actually more recently though I've started coaching goalball, which is of course the only other Paralympic sport that doesn't have an Olympic equivalent. Um, so I'm still tutoring on some courses. So I'm still got my toe in the water at least. I've got an exciting young athlete who's just been invited to England Futures training. So that's nice to be involved with somebody, and I've been involved with her sort of almost from the beginning. So that's been really good to do. And I still have some of the sort of England level athletes that ask me for coaching. So yes,
Yeah.
available if needed.
Yes. And so you're involved in global, and is that the so are you involved in global as in the athlete coaching side of things, or what's your role within that?
Yeah, I'm become a club coach for a local team, the Cambridge Dons.
Okay.
Um, and it's really interesting. It's a really good challenge from a coaching point of view. The goalball are probably at the stage that Boccia were maybe 10 or 15 years ago, in that they don't have a coaching program yet. They have a leaders award, and then there's nothing else around. So um, I think everybody knew that it, when they advertised for a coach, they were either going to get somebody that knew goalball or somebody that knew coaching. It was very unlikely that they get somebody who knew both. And I'd done my leaders award with goalball, so I knew a little bit about it. Um, and of course, I've done a lot of work around inclusion, so I knew enough to get me started on working with people with visual impairments. Um, and then we just agreed that we're going to work together. So I bring my coaching knowledge, and then I tap into their, especially the more advanced tactical side of things, and we build it together. And we've got a really good open relationship where the players can say, actually, Sandra, and tell me if I've maybe not sure about something. But I can also go and say, I want to do this practice, but I need you to help me with actually what are the key things we're looking for in this practice. So it's working really well at the moment. I think I'm getting some good feedback. I should be tested this weekend. We're up at the English Institute of Sport, and it's a higher level of play than I've been involved with before. So that means a higher level of coaching knowledge and ability. So right after this meeting, the rest of my day is being committed to looking at the goalball rules and making sure that I don't let anybody down at the weekend, because coaches can give away penalties, and I don't want that to be me.
No, of course not. No, and yeah, that's right. So it's still, would you, would it be fair to say global is still in its development side of things? And
Yeah, I think goalball are doing very well, but in terms of the national governing body and as I say, things like coach progression, they're at the beginning of their journey with that.
yeah,
Um,
so
so
hopefully we get to see them in future Paralympics.
Oh, I think that's very much on the cards. At goalball, the women have just done really well at a competition they went to just before Christmas, um, and the men I think are already in a higher league. I don't know enough about the top level of goalball yet, but I
No,
know that actually we've just got some funding, which is really good. So that means that there's people who think goalball is going places, and goalball may well qualify for 2024. So I think it's a watch this space.
yes,
Yeah.
we shall. And what would you wish Boccia in general would be like in the future, in terms of in general across the
Yeah,
world?
look, I love that boccia's inclusive, but my heart is still in the Paralympic side of boccia.
Of course.
Um, I'm I've been frustrated recently about the classification. There's been some classification changes that have meant there's one class, the BC2 class, that seems to have been decimated by people who've now been classified out of the sport. And I
Yeah.
know, Peter, you'll know a lot about that, but I know too many athletes that that's happened to. And that's so I would love to see that BC5 group being included. I don't know if it'll ever happen. I understand too much about how the Paralympic quotas are done and everything else. and the fact that we've just gone to having separate sex male and female competitions means that that Paralympic quota is probably not going to be able to be extended into a wider group. But look, Boccia's come so far since I've been involved with it. I was actually sat on the international governing body for a few years from 2000, and there were like 6 of us, and that was it. And we were organising World Boccia. And now it's a much bigger group. There's a lot more people involved. There's people involved in all sorts of angles of it. We've got a lot more competitions. It's a lot more professional. There's a great deal happening. I want people to enjoy Boccia. That's the biggest thing. Play it because you love it. Be involved as a volunteer because you love it. I was told when I started at Trelaws, you either lasted 6 months or 6 years, because either it was for you or it wasn't. And I think Boccia's the same. There's so many people that come along to Boccia, and you've either got those people who think it's like watching paint dry because it's quite a slow game, or you've got those people who start to understand the tactics and get thoroughly involved straight away and just keep wanting to come back. And that's what we want. We want everybody to enjoy it. And tactically, skills-wise, I love the tactics involved in Boccia. I love the development that goes into the balls and the ramps and everything else. And who knows where the game's going to go. 20 years ago, we would never have seen a ball on top of another ball. We probably didn't know what a lob shot was. And if you can ever find any really old footage of Boccia, you'll realise how far we've come already. So, yeah, just keep going and keep enjoying it. That's my hope for the future.
Brilliant. Well, that's everything. So thank you very much for coming on, and I will just stop recording. So thank you for coming and doing this interview.
Thank you.
Stop recording.